Okay, it looks like we're recording. Welcome to the October 7 meeting of the Kubernetes IoT Edge Working Group. We have a fairly light agenda today, but any members or even prospective members who have popped in for the first time are welcome to add discussion topics right now if you like. Let me paste the agenda doc in the chat. What happens when we don't have much on the agenda is we often just kind of morph this into a birds of a feather conversation format of talking about whatever people would like to discuss. We did have one item that I put on the agenda, which is the upcoming presentation at KubeCon North America. That, like every conference these days, is going to be online. And this group got a session accepted where we're going to present on event-driven at Edge. This is likely to be Deanna and I haven't prepared the deck yet, but we're planning on this being a deeper dive into what we got started with in the talk I did with Cindy at KubeCon Europe on, we called it serverless at Edge in that one, I think, but same concept where, serverless function as a service is often a technique where you can use event-driven to get down to areas where it isn't desirable or even feasible to host a Kubernetes worker node. There's a technique where you can land things capable of generating messages on an event bus that are consumed. You do eventually have to get up to a tier where you're running Kubernetes, or at least you do for the purposes of this group, which is Kubernetes oriented. But you can actually land code capable of generating events on quite small systems. You have things all the way down to Arduinos and embedded systems that aren't even running Linux or perhaps aren't even running an OS at all. And anyway, that was the plan for this upcoming talk in November. And I put a link to the item in the agenda doc. I think that if you want to join that conference, they had a discount period. I don't know if it's still open or not, but it was like 25 or 50 bucks. They also have scholarships available. And in my experience, I've had friends who applied for those. So if anybody is financially constrained, student, out of work, whatever, I think, it's just a matter of writing a plausible reason into your application and you can probably get a free conference registration. Anyway, I don't want to monopolize this, so Deanna, Cindy, I'll turn it over to you for any remarks you might have.
I haven't been joining our meeting for a few times. I'm just curious, like from in the past, like we've done several reference architecture designs, and then I'm just throwing the feather to hear, like people here, like, are you experiencing any like new customer scenarios or demands, any progress made, like maybe Qton has a company, you guys have done some improvement in the security area?
Yeah, the other thing, Cindy, is we do have some people who, like you, who haven't been here regularly. I wonder if we should go around with introductions since we don't have a lot on the agenda anyway. Some of these people might not know who the other faces are if they're seeing them for the first time.
Mm-hmm. In that case, I can have a quick intro myself. I'm Cindy Xing. Currently, I'm working in Microsoft, focusing on Azure IoT Edge. So being in this group for a couple of years now, had led the Cube Edge project. Right now, it's in the CNCF incubation. So look forward to working with you all. Yeah.
Why don't you pick the next person and then we'll do it that way. Okay, I'll pick the next person. Kilton, why don't you go?
Okay, sure. So even though this is on public record, I'm not scared of having everyone see that I'm in my car. It's my mobile meeting place for the day. So at a customer site. So my name is Kilton Hopkins, and I've been working with edge computing tech since about like 2012, but 2014 is when it really started to kick off with the IoT boom. I'm a technologist, and I also am co-founder of a company called EdgeWorks. The thing that we've done that you all might be familiar with is create this Eclipse IO Fog, which is with Kubernetes or not Kubernetes, and edge orchestration and runtime framework that you can use for doing microservices at the edge. So like everyone on this call, there's a lot of different things I know about and a whole lot more I don't know about. So we all show up here to give our 2 cents and try to figure stuff out. And that's my role.
Go ahead and pick the next person.
Oh, and I get to pick. Dayan, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, I'll be quick because I talked with, I think, most of you on one occasion or the other. So I work for Red Hat, been in the IoT Edge area for the last couple of years, active in the Edge IoT community, and basically helped started this working group. Barry, why don't you go next?
Barry Kaplan. I work for a company called Vimana. We build vertical applications in the connected industrial space. We started out with mainly manufacturing plants, but now we kind of generalize into more bits. We're much more in the user space of the edge technology than the developing of the edge technology. So we focus on delivering applications, and a lot of it is trying to figure out how to utilize some of the various technologies and modernize, standardize, all that kind of fun stuff.
So did you get, for your business, did you get started pre-Kubernetes and you're just starting to kind of morph into Kubernetes now, or was this?
Yeah, we started pre-Docker. So, I mean, it was, So we've gone from no Docker to Mesos to Nomad to Kubernetes. And we had our own edge technology that we used to deploy things on the edge. And so, a lot of that stuff is 10, 12 years old. I mean, a lot of it's been updated in the cloud side, but the edge side, not so much. So that's
yeah. Well, I'd be really curious to hear more, maybe not in this intro phase. And if you're not prepared today, maybe at a future meeting, the rules with the CNCF is it shouldn't turn into a commercial presentation, but if you'd be willing to just go into kind of things that are going well, things that are going badly, and, we'd love to hear that kind of conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I've given some ad hoc, I guess, in some of the other working groups I started to join as well in this space. So I'd be happy to do that at some point.
Go ahead and pick the next victim.
Who is next here? Jerry, I guess. You haven't heard from Jerry?
Good morning. Thank you. Sorry. I'm sitting here trying to juggle 2 different conference calls, one on my mobile, one here, so I apologize. The life of COVID, too many meetings virtually. Jerry Schumann, I'm the founder of a company called Flight. I participated a little bit on this call a few times, and have been on the Slack channel often. We're basically a company that is specifically IoT centric, really developed a platform. In fact, in my previous incarnation of another company I started, which is still in operation on the East Coast and is a kind of a major player now in the industrial utility IoT marketplace. And the platform that we ultimately developed there is something I wanted to take to a more horizontal play to a larger IoT audience. So that's kind of what we've done with Flight, and just getting started right now, building a large LoRaWAN network here in my hometown of Long Beach. We just put a large set of antennas on top to start doing some data telemetry coming from sensors, and we're starting to work with this local city here in the Port of Long Beach, Port of LA, and start looking at how we can get more data telemetry flowing in, and how we can take advantage of you know, the current climate that we're in. We're all Kubernetes based, been Kubernetes based since the beginning. I don't even want to count the number of clusters I built at this point, but and everything from across, you know, large cloud implementations to, you know, very much bleeding edge ARM kind of edge implementations before it was ready, before we had opportunities in Kubernetes on the edge. But anyways, a little bit of my background. So thank you.
So Jerry, I live about 6 miles from Long Beach. So when this COVID thing is over, we're going to have to get together. I'll love to see a demo of it. And maybe we can even do a joint presentation or something at the local Kubernetes meetup when that thing resumes.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I would love to do that. So that's great. Great to know. I don't get, with COVID, no get out anymore, but except for my own little office here, but that's about it.
Yeah, who knows? With maybe this is an incentive for IoT. There are certain things that replace people with automation that actually are some of the strongest parts of the economy these days.
You're starting to see a lot of stories about that, and you know the whole, you know, creative ways to use digitalization and you know, to supplement and or, you know, augment kind of what we're normally doing, you know, as meat puppets. So it's gonna be interesting to see kind of how it fleshes out here in the end. That's why I'm currently very active at with the Economic Development Department here in Long Beach, discussing, you know, what's the benefits of having a long distance, low power telemetry network available to citizenry, small business, large business. You know, and we have a very big burgeoning aerospace here now in Long Beach. We have, I don't know, most of the major rocket companies now are set up shop here. We've got Rocket Lab and Relativity Space, and we've got Spin Launch and Virgin Orbit, and I understand there's like three or four more rocket companies that are moving in. So it's going to be Long Beach is kind of in a renaissance right now from an aerospace perspective, and I'm hoping we can bring kind of, you know, edge IoT and specifically Kubernetes into that play. I know they're looking. So
yeah, your talk about a low power telemetry network is kind of interesting. I don't know how long you've been in the industry, but Southern California has always been an epicenter. I choose that word because a lot of this is because of concerns of earthquake taking out infrastructure, where a lot of these leading edge things have gone in here. I think the old Ricochet network is still in operation. At one time it was done by a startup, and I think it's Southern California Edison was a user originally, but is still maintaining that. It's either them or one of the other utilities.
Yeah, I think there's still a couple of Ricochet nodes up, not many, but I've industry-wise been, you know, many decades at this point, 35 years. So been around the track 100 times. So, but yeah, no, the low power networks, I mean, I'm pushing hard. I mean, LoRa's phenomenally amazing. I mean, if you've not played with LoRa, I highly suggest you guys do, because it's pretty much a game changer. I mean, it's a no cost network, pretty much public oriented. The Things network out of, I think they're Norway actually, or Netherlands, is kind of where it kind of originated, but it goes across the world now. And I'm currently working with the Helium network, which is a blockchain implementation, and another company called Layer Zero. But, you know, it's pretty easy to stand one up. It's pretty easy to buy sensors to integrate with them. You know, you can get them for $50, $40, $100. I mean, it's not that hard to start kind of implementing a
at that point, maybe you could even use it for home automation and
well, that's the idea. Well, you know, one of the latest announcements is, and I don't know if you guys heard about this, and this is another interesting play for WGI, you know, for the edge implementations. Amazon just announced that they're going to be pushing out what they're calling their Sidewalk network, Amazon Sidewalk. It's basically a low power network. It's going to be embedded in every one of your Alexa devices. Anything Amazon's out there shipping, the Rings, the Blink cameras, all of them. And the idea is that they are going to be building, based on their current product offering, a low power data network for telemetry information. So it's this is a burgeoning thing.
Sidewalk.
Sidewalk, huh?
Amazon Sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about it. I mean, there are some people suggesting it's one of these things where if it's free, then
Yeah.
you're the product too. So some of these things you might be divulging information that they could monetize, which
Oh
is,
yeah, we could get into the whole privacy thing, but I'll stay away from that particular subject matter.
Yeah.
I know what Amazon's motivation is. It's not my motivation, but but the idea that we could have a fairly transparent, ubiquitous, network specifically built for data coming from sensors could be really phenomenally groundbreaking, especially when you start talking about machine-to-machine economies. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's where this really starts to play, and then you start looking at what IoT is doing and has been doing with what they call the Tangle, which is a non-blockchain implementation. It's a Merkle tree, but it's a Merkle tree implementation of, and they have a token called the IOTA token. But the whole idea is they built a transactional engine for machine-to-machine economy. They've already got Jaguar on board, Mercedes on board, a lot of European companies that are starting to do this. So that they can start transmitting their data back into the Tangle, storing it there, and then creating those immutable records that they can turn around and sell for one reason or another.
Yep.
It's-
That's
I'm curious, like, sorry, I'm curious, Jerry, like, you mentioned like a Kubernetes, you want is a high adopter in this area. So I'm curious, like comparing this embedded system versus a Kubernetes, like what's the key factor why people want to adopt a Kubernetes? Like,
Well, my take on it, and this is only my take on it. If you've done any large number of embedded systems that are ultimately deployed to a large region, and you want to manage them in some singular fashion, it's an impossibility. I mean, it's hard enough just to do upgrades. That's the whole OTA phenomena that you end up having to deal with. But I mean, the idea of having an orchestration fabric that incorporates your edge devices, I think is groundbreaking. I mean, the idea from an IT perspective, not from necessarily a product vendor like myself, but if I'm an individual in an enterprise and I'm sitting there and I'm already having a hard time managing my 150 individual people using personal computers on my network. The idea that my company starts spawning off a whole slew of IoT edge devices, how do I manage that? How do I watch cybersecurity? How do I change, if my workflow changes internally, how do I change that implementation at the edge if the edge is actually, impacted in that? So that's where I think Kubernetes, has a phenomenal role to play, and it's what I've been experimenting with for, oh my God, it's been probably 2 years now since I stood up a small Odroid cluster on ARM that I tried to basically build, Kate's cluster on, and failed miserably. But regardless, it was the attempt to start demonstrating that. And the other reality for a product vendor that is Kubernetes oriented, you don't always get great internet Wi-Fi in the basement of a hotel when you're doing demos. So the idea that I could have a tag along Kubernetes cluster with me based on small single board computers, which I've now done a few times over. You see lots of Raspberry Pi clusters out there. But the idea of transporting that feature functionality directly with you on an airplane into a hotel, basement somewhere without internet connectivity, and be able to demo your product and demo the power, including I drag along a low power network with me. Laura's already on board, so I can have my sensor sitting there doing everything I want, and it's all self-contained. I mean, and that's a pretty powerful reason for a smaller single board. What I'll call an edge might not be the literal edge, but an edge level implementation for Kubernetes.
Cool.
I'd say, Cindy, our motivation is very similar to that, because we have I don't know, about 1,000 edge nodes that are aggregator nodes. Behind them are tens of thousands of devices, but and those are across maybe 400 plants across the world, is just a pain in the ass. I mean, it's an untenable problem. And basically we have version drift all over the place and configuration drift. It's a major obstacle to be able to continue to grow. And as now we're getting into not just factories, but all kinds of industrial devices, that's going to go up an order of magnitude. We really need something to be able to manage those edge devices in the same way we manage our cloud devices.
Yeah, 100%.
You look at the industry, like say AWS Greengrass, they use Lambda, or even they use Docker Compose for container. And then for Azure, we have Kubernetes solution, but majority is Docker as well. So I wonder, like, you know, like from a commercial perspective, like cloud providers, we are all doing our own approach. From the community, what I heard is people are waiting to use Kubernetes. So help me understand what exactly the needs are in the community or in the industry from your perspective.
Not
Well-
sure I exactly follow that beyond what we talked
So
about.
basically, I think from commercial perspective, like you look at Microsoft or Amazon, it's not Kubernetes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing too. It's just the fact that they're different too, because we run on Google, Amazon, and Azure for different parts of our deployments and different customers. So we really can't say we're going to only be, you know, Azure or only be, you know, Microsoft. If I've always predicted, and maybe you can tell me this is true, but I always predicted at some point the three big are going to drop their homegrown edge types of things and adopt more of a standard. We'll deploy Kubernetes on the edge and give you better tooling around that, rather than saying, here's our magic, you know, edge sauce that you can run that's specific to what we do.
So,
Yeah, the interesting remark I'll make is that if you look at some of the biggest IoT networks that are already out there, leading edge, it's probably your Alexa speakers and your Google Home Assistant speakers. The numbers of those are phenomenal. And they're phenomenal enough to where that's why Amazon Sidewalk is plausible. If you get some kind of density like that, you could actually, for free, get customers to pay the power bill and the physical hosting of enough to make a mesh network that you can get for free. There aren't many people in a commercial position to do that, but Amazon and Google are. Maybe even some of the car makers are, if they get a lot of, you know, locality density and spread to where these things can just communicate to each other to build a mesh network.
Yeah.
But they're keeping all of that proprietary. You know, it's pretty much a given that you can look at the resource because people have done teardowns on those Alexa speakers, and there's no way they're running Kubernetes nodes in there, nor could they, because they just don't have enough CPU and memory. But there's a whole niche in commerce where you don't really want to give control of that critical aspect of your business over to an Amazon or Google, I suspect. I mean, you could make the decision to do it. But hey, if there's an open source infrastructure that's portable and community, that might be something far more attractive.
Yeah, that's why I'm pushing constantly with you know, whether it ends up being Eclipse IO Fog or what. That's why I'm pushing constantly for continued architectural revision to make sure that we arrive at something that has surfaced all of what has been funneled in from everyone's needs. And it's just going to take time. And I agree with you, Steve, that at some point, X version of, you know, microservices at the edge or whatever it is, or X version of IoT or edge gateway device management is going to drop their slightly different proprietary version to go with the standard that's solidified. But it won't happen until the standard solidifies. So it's, for right now, it makes sense to kind of do your own thing, embed it in your products so that you've got kind of your own walled garden that's lightly extendable. But eventually all of that always comes down to whatever open standard took over. And so, yeah, I know there's so much to juggle there that there's nobody is going to be able to solve it in a single framework or a single project or anything. But eventually, maybe 3 more years from now, we'll have some standards that we all agree, you know, kind of encompass everyone's needs very well.
And it probably won't be all Kubernetes, because again, when we get to the constrained devices, you're not running Kubernetes,
Right.
You know, on the small. So the Kubernetes is one part of it for when we're literally running gateways that have horsepower, and we're doing edge processing, we're doing R-tire filtering, downsampling, you know, stuff that's low latency. But we still have to talk to literally the smaller edge device. And I'm mainly only from the industrial context, and that we don't really do commercial stuff other than connected vehicles. But when you get to even the small sensors, we still have to provision software on them. We still have to manage them as well. So it doesn't stop at Kubernetes, but Kubernetes solves the problem at least of you know, at least just standardizes it. I mean, you know, who knows if, you know.
Yeah. And if you can orchestrate using Kubernetes at the top level, you know, this kind of master grade orchestration, and have it have minions that do the work down the lower levels, you can orchestrate things like firmware rollouts as long as you have the ability to extend on the top level and something to carry it out, execute it on the lowest. But it has to merge together really seamlessly. Is the current problem we have is there are pieces for almost everything, but those pieces aren't glued together very well, and they don't have the right hooks to hand off. And so right, there's like way too much custom glue needs to be written today.
I think the other thing is, unlike Kubernetes, where in the orchestration arena, it got enough critical mass that everybody got behind it, and
That's
all the
the
tool
issue.
chains work with it.
Yep.
And some of these other piecemeal solutions, the trouble is that you've got, instead of one big fish, you've got hundreds of small ones in a pond that only have enough food for maybe 3. And you got to wait to see what the survivor is.
I agree that standards adoption is a big, giant primary driver here. I think the other part of it is, you know, widespread open source support of those standards in implementations that are lower cost than what these, you know, outlier implementations from vendors are going for. And that is what's turned the tide in a lot of what's happened in enterprise software. I mean, I will say we're still very early on. My personal view of this world, only having to try to educate the North American utility market over the course of the past 6 years about, you know, the value of containers when they were very much still locked into running Windows NT servers and, you know, monolithic programming. But, you know, once they started to see the power of, you know, CI/CD and containers and Kubernetes and all the capabilities that we're bringing to bear, and the performant nature of that, you know, of microservices, you know, all of a sudden, you know, we've got a groundswell of people that now finally, after, especially now being demonstrable, where we've got a widespread acceptance of, yeah, this is the future, or even though the future was started 10 years ago, this is the future now for them. But I think that enterprise computing has still got a long ways to go when it comes to containers. They are embracing, at least from a Docker level, obviously, because of the big VM push initially. I think that helped a lot of ways. But I do think standardization in combination with really solid open source contributions is what will push it over the edge.
And hopefully cost is going to change too, because, and I know in our environment, if we ran our infrastructure using the managed services of Azure or AWS, it's 100x more.
Yeah, it is.
It's just so much more expensive. It's not even in the realm of possibility.
Especially storage.
Mm-hmm.
What used to be supposedly the cost-effective mechanism is actually one of the more expensive things, especially when you start getting into a lot of big data push.
It works great for the startup that's doing a little stuff.
It works perfectly.
Once you go beyond that, because we just took over a connected vehicle platform and they were running on Google, and we took their costs down. I think it was a 300% or 300 times reduction in cost for the same capabilities just by switching off to managed services.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would be a sticking point, because holding the data means that there's something that keeps you on that platform, right? And so that's a key way to monetize. Jerry, what you mentioned earlier about LoRa and the revolution of LoRaWAN, that is essentially the story that you were telling about enterprise, you know, and the shift to containers happening in low power radio. When Semtech open sourced LoRaWAN, it moved from, will Sigfox take over the world, to nope, no way. Everyone loves LoRaWAN because it's a zero cost network. Now we have innovation on top of it that I think is really thrilling.
I do too, and I kind of left the IoT environment. I was doing some consulting, you know, 7 years ago, early on, and then basically left to start this other company, Ping Things, that ended up doing the utility marketplace stuff, and kind of lost sight of what was happening inside of IoT. When I came back after I left Ping Things and started Flight, I started looking around at what had changed in the environment and all the rest of it. And I was blown away by what happened in that short period of time with LoRa, because I mean, Sigfox was the player that was going to take over the world. And I was talking to Winky about 2 weeks ago on a conference call, and you know, they're still growing at, you know, hyperbolic rates for the Things network, and LoRa is just continuing to generate more and more products based on the Semtech technology. And in fact, that's what Sidewalk's going to be for Amazon. the Amazon engineers figured out basically how to run LoRa on top of, or at least the basically writing a chirp protocol for BLE, so that they can extend the range of Bluetooth Low Energy. So you know, I don't know much more than that about it. I've just been watching the press releases, and I haven't really done a technical deep dive. But it's an interesting take on, you know, I mean, it's gotten that much momentum that, you know, it's got people like Amazon going, interesting. Maybe we should extend our own tentacles using the technology.
So we went into introductions, and somebody joined late in, but I want to give him a chance to come in here because I think he can add a lot to this conversation too. He's affiliated with the CubeEdge project.
Hi, this is In. I mainly working on the CubeEdge project right now. So yeah, that's about it. And I log in at the Crano first, then I realized that I log out and log in again with my real name. Yeah, the Crano community, they have the common account. You need to use that to log in. I was logged in last night.
Well, you came in late, but we started this with no agenda, but Cindy suggested that we did introductions, and Cindy opened it up for discussions of what the use cases are and why people were interested in Kubernetes for this.
Yeah, I was in the beginning. I said I was logged in at the Crano shared account, so it doesn't show my name. So I log out and log in again. I catch most of this. Thank you.
So then, like, Yin, from your perspective, what's your take? Like, how do you see Kubernetes can benefit to enterprise or customers?
You mean the IoT world or edge world?
Like both, or maybe, yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, the main benefit is, as I said, when we start a KubeEdge project, we think before, as I think Jerry, right? He mentioned the pre-Docker or pre-Kubernetes world, everybody use embedded or lower language, and there's not much change on the edge or IoT side, not like the cloud evolution. So we were thinking with that Kubernetes, so we really can use a cloud to control or manage the edge and IoT device. So that really lowered the bar for the application development and all the OTA and the life cycle management. I think that's, even though it's not in the real edge world, but with edge plus cloud and with faster network, that's the evolution change.
Okay.
Just as a plug, since you're from Microsoft, Cindy, I mean, one of our biggest pain points has been, at least in manufacturing plants, they run Windows for a lot of things. And some of the machines we connect to literally require Windows 95 Beta 2 DLLs, you know, for machines that are so old. But really, not being able to effectively run, you know, Docker on all Windows and stuff has been just killed us, right? So that's still a problem for us because even if we can run Kubernetes, but you know, there's no Kubernetes yet that runs on Windows, not even K3s. So we're still in a really bad position to be able to deal with that particular space. So we're really waiting for Microsoft to catch up to the rest of the world. And
yeah, Barry, it isn't just Microsoft, by the way. I didn't introduce myself if you haven't met me before, but I'm with VMware. And Windows containers actually have been released very recently, but there is such a thing. Some might allege it's kind of bleeding edge at this point, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know we track it pretty closely, but it is, you know, now I have to convince 300 plants to upgrade their, you know, their Windows servers, which I don't want to do. Yeah, you talk about industrial, you know, like you know, local utilities, manufacturing. A clipboard is state of the art for a lot of these guys. So, you know, trying to get them to do anything.
I hate to admit it at this point, but I'm probably a guilty party for that Windows domination for a lot of manufacturing. I was on the founding engineering team for Wonderware, which back in the 90s, before things were even called IoT, went out there and landed in 85% of the world's factories. And, you know, unlike cloud, one of the big issues with Edge is that the device life cycles are easily 10 years. I mean, you know, you go into a data center people routinely replace servers every 5 years. But you go into the physical industrial control world, frankly, they'd replace them every 50 or 100 years if they could get away with it.
Yeah, 30
And
years is pretty typical for
yeah,
some of the industrial equipment.
when I first started in the industry, I remember running into these pneumatic control systems out of the 40s and 50s. I'm not sure they're not still out there to a small degree, but they lasted 50 years.
I think meanwhile, like some of the Windows applications, they're really hard to containerize. So potentially in the community, we should think about how Kubernetes can support a native process. That way, like even you can run the Kubernetes cluster with the hybrid workload, including both container and host process.
That was the same ask I asked of Kelton recently, is for IOFog to be able to launch native applications, not just Dockerized and applications, because that but we still need to be able to run the management control on the Windows boxes. So yeah, we can run IOFog as a native app to maybe launch those apps outside of Docker, but then we still lose the ability to do some of what we need to do on the edge, which is some of the stream processing and some low latency issues. We still need to do that. So then we end up having to tell customers, okay, you got to have this Linux box over here, and then we'll have another Windows box over here to run the things that require Windows workloads. And for small plants, that doesn't work, right? Because they only have 100 machines or 50 machines.
Yeah, what you really need is you need an extension and like an agent that runs, all the way back Win32, the most basic Win32 calls. So it's Win95, 98. God help you, Emmy, whatever, if you still come across that, and can allow you to trigger native processes, but also give you, maybe the ability to run a certain type of new process. Maybe it's written in C++ or, something that goes cross compatible. And that way you can do your processing right there where you only have like one Windows machine to talk to the equipment and also, do a little bit of edge pre-processing. Sounds like you need a development model in addition to just being able to run the native software that you've got now.
Yeah, I mean, we have our own little agent similar to what the IOFog agent is, but it literally just it interfaces with the native Windows process manager to install things, make sure they're running, and it could do it over the wire. So it's kind of our homegrown Hawkbit, if you will, but talking to Windows processes. And again, that's still going to be part of it, because they're probably, for us, I don't think some of these native apps are never going to go away in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So it's not like I can say, oh, Kubernetes and Docker will save the day. It's not going to save the day for us.
It'd be interesting to
run these workloads.
To maybe compose an open source project that strikes me that you could build something out of just MQTT that could go down there and give the commands and control.
Yeah, it's an MQTT app that basically listens to our cloud, that tells it what to do. I mean, it's not packaged in a way that we would open. It's not documented well enough or anything for anyone else to use it. We could do that. But there's so many other things going on right now. It seems like there's probably other homes that would be better for us to contribute to than trying to do that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these things, the way these open source projects have started up is a couple of companies or organizations have a common need and they do decide to get together. So maybe, it seems like that should be generically useful across a lot of boundaries, to the point where an open source project like that should exist, whether it does or not. Maybe we can get some critical mass to get it started here.
Yeah, we don't find anything proprietary in that. That stuff, again, it has nothing to do with what we build for our customers. That's just the necessary evils you have to.
How are people? One thing I'm running into now with a client in Chicago, and haven't really started dipping my toes into what's out there from a project standpoint. One of the areas that I think is a potential barrier for a wider spread adoption is the fact that most of these large corporate enterprises are obviously very security concerned, but they tend to do all their work through a single pane of glass in the form of AD, right? I mean, that's where they're basically dealing with all their authentication. So, how do we extend that single pane of glass look into RBAC controls inside of Kubernetes, or any other kind of IAM kind of capabilities inside of Kubernetes? I think that's going to be the next major barrier that we're going to have to jump over as a community, because It's
Yeah,
not,
and they have to do it differently because there's so many notorious episodes of
of course.
industrial IoT getting hijacked and ransomware now that you really shouldn't model it on the old way you did it because that isn't working already.
But it's not modeling it on AD, but
Yeah.
allowing for that. You know, I don't want to change somebody's tool belt. The worst thing, the last thing you want to do in a major enterprise, the most expensive thing you could ever do, going out selling to corporate enterprise customers, is trying to get them to change their tools.
Which you don't do anyway, so.
Yeah.
But I think another avenue that's related to Kubernetes that is big, I mean, Kubernetes could do orchestration of containerized apps, and given the control plane is extendable, you can do device management. But I think the third leg of that is network management, where if you could take concepts like service mesh down to the edge to where you could have it manage the network for you rather than that be homegrown tools and a lot of things you roll yourself, do the edge leaf node to leaf node command and control. You know, you don't want to be in the data plane, but if you can at least drop policies for security and updates of certificates and things, that would be a huge win that makes such obvious sense that something in the food chain has to evolve to fill that niche.
I would think that a layer to interpret between whatever is your center of identity, whether it's Active Directory or shoot, what's the used to be, was that
LDAP.
Yeah, or just plain old LDAP or whatever it was that was a Sun Microsystems thing that's now open. I can't remember the.
Oh my God.
Was it called OpenID? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OAuth.
Yeah, all of that. So whatever your provider is, it sounds like we need a layer to basically translate between that and all of the permissions that you'd like to expose going down. And that way you keep the same tooling up top, whatever you're using. But you can write maybe an adapter if it's something, you know, rare, and if it's your regular single sign-on stuff, it just merges right in with your identities and Active Directory. But then it interprets downstream in a way that, you know, that you can then issue commands out with the security check and stuff, such as I have the permission to see the status of an edge gateway that's running in a factory. I do not have the permission to reboot it. And so even though I might want to try to issue the command via the API directly because I'm trying to do something nefarious, my identity just simply doesn't allow it. So the command gets received but blocked. And that's stuff that you don't have present in any of the existing permissions and role systems. But if you take the permissions and roles and then something else enforces security, it would then work. But that layer is yet another piece that has to be really well defined and probably has to be open. Otherwise, I can see it just being, you know, not going anywhere.
And now you're basically reinventing SNMP. So
that is true. Actually, you could use that. Maybe you could use SNMP and which is well established to carry all of your requests so that it has authentication check. That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, the other concern I'd have is
My
that
understanding, like a Kubernetes right now does support OpenID or AD as a plugin. You can, like, from talking to the control plane perspective, you can connect with the AD or OpenID so that, like, you can use the AD identity to be able to manage your resources. However, I think to allow the workload authenticate with each other using AD, I believe that's not supported.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that AD is really originated to authenticate people, but there's a lot of stuff going on where a lot of this is actually intended to replace people, and it doesn't or wasn't architected to authenticate devices. Should this app be authorized to run on this device? Did my device get physically stolen and hijacked or cloned? You know, those kinds of issues go far beyond AD, but you need to look at the big picture to integrate all of that. Now, Barry, I can hear him saying already that these people will never change the old stuff, and you're right about that. But somehow, maybe if there was a way to even get into the old stuff to at least prove that you're talking to who you think you're talking to, not as a person, but as a process or location. I think that's important. And
well, I mean, there are opportunities to really modernize because, I mean, a lot of the plants now, one of their biggest problems, especially for a lot of industrial, is just getting the connectivity. So they're starting to look at the 5G private networks. and so other ways that, not so much worried about low power, but just how can you get a network in a complex industrial space where you can't run wires? You just can't do it. So now
or the wire is so expensive.
And it's going to be, so that whole infrastructure layer will be new, and it's mainly for the OT people, not the IT people. And that's also a problem in the industrial spaces. They're different worlds.
Yeah, they
the
are.
OT people don't like the IT people, and they don't like them touching their stuff.
And the IT people don't like the
So,
IT.
we may have opportunities to not have to, because this reminds me of a science fiction book I read a long time ago, where some time in the future, maybe 1,000 years, all of our compute network has like thousands of layers of virtualization that just, you never got rid of an old operating system. It's all just running layers and layers.
What was that book? I want to read it.
I don't remember. I remember it was one guy that like was frozen and woke up 1,000 years later. He was the only one that knew how to work at the lowest level, so he was able to take over the world or whatever.
If you think of it, drop it in the Slack channel. I want to read that.
He was a god. He knew Fortran.
Something like that.
Nice discussion. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how these meetings sometimes that have no agenda are kind of the most interesting ones compared to getting a speaker in. We've got 5 minutes left. If anybody has any other things to throw out, or just we can continue on with this.
Yeah. Just as an aside, I can't put my name on the page, the Google page. I don't know if who grants.
You
that.
need to join the group, the Google group, and I think you
Join the Google group? Okay.
Yeah, it's a mailing list. So you join the group, and then the edit access is authorized for anybody who's a group member.
Okay.
Another common thing is people have several Google accounts, like a work and a personal.
Yeah.
So if you get in as the wrong one, the edit access won't work.
I don't know if I ever had edit access to this. All right, I'll find the Google group and do that.
If you have any issues, just ping us. We'll figure it out.
Okay, so one thing that at running groups like this, you're always out to get content that's interesting to the community. So anybody got any suggestions? I'm willing, if I get enough leeway, several weeks hopefully, to go out and try to land a speaker. If somebody wants to nominate a topic you're curious about, and we'll go try to line up speakers, or if you'd rather have a birds of a feather, just open discussion, we could do it that way. But we're always looking for topics.
I think I'm really curious about the sidewalk, like Jerry mentioned. If we can get some AWS Go guys.
Yeah. Well, one of the constraints we have is that this group is funded by the CNCF under Kubernetes.
Okay.
So they're not really, the topic should be at least somewhat related to Kubernetes rather than just generic IoT Edge. I mean, there might be other groups that would be free form, but I think technically we're constrained to be subjects that are related to Kubernetes. And I don't know if Sidewalk qualifies in that regard.
But I think we can make an exception every once in a while, because it's our mission as well to educate us, the Kubernetes folks, about what's going on in the IoT and Edge. So
I just say that because I've actually been DM'd on Twitter by people who contended that stuff we put on wasn't proper subject matter. So there are people who will whine about it.
Yeah. It's a huge field, so it's hard to stay focused on one technology, right?
I think it will be really useful, like because I'm just thinking from my perspective. I'm not very close to the end customers. So like Jerry, Barry, or Kilton, you guys, if you can like share the pain points our customer needs, and then we can all think about, like, as a team or in this group, what are the things I can do, like, or people can do, or we can get speakers, we talk here. That way, like, we can all enable everybody, right?
Well, Cindy, you're in the Seattle area, so I'll throw this out as the challenge to you then. You can go find somebody at Amazon to go talk about Sidewalk.
I can take that role, and then let me figure out. I can search Google and then try to connect. But meanwhile, if you guys have anything like you think is useful, let's have the discussion. Yeah.
I'm connected to the actual product manager of Sidewalk. So if you need me to reach out, I can do that.
Yeah, that would be great. I think let us understand like the lower one, or like what kind of scenarios you mentioned about the low power telemetry. So those are really helpful. I think it will be helpful for everybody. Yeah.
If we were going to do that, it might be interesting to package in AWS's other, I forget the name of it, but the network that lives just on the other side of the telco. So the one hop or the zero hop basically they're moving their cloud down closer to the edge.
Oh, you're talking
they're similar, solving similar issues to some degree. So.
Oh, you're talking about Vapor IO?
No, it wasn't Vapor IO. I just read about it the other day.
You know about Vapor?
No, I don't.
Vapor has basically gotten into bed with Crown Castle. Crown Castle is actually the #1 owner of cell towers throughout the United States, North America. And what they're doing is they're basically putting containerized data centers at the base of the antenna.
Yeah.
So you're going to be able to basically float, a Kubernetes cluster into one of the containers and across their entire backhaul, so that you are closer to the end nodes on the edge. But Vapor IO is a very interesting play. They're doing some very intriguing stuff.
Like sub 20 milliseconds, I think, expected.
Yeah.
You could call it kind of like a metro cloud.
Boy, maybe we should get them to give a presentation, especially if they are hosting Kubernetes. That is
they are, and they have a lot of open stuff going on, and they created an edge group that is focused on their areas of interest too. So I think they would qualify definitely as including multi-vendor and community interest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who has the connect to Vapor?
I have a connect to Vapor. I haven't talked to them in a while, but I got into some initial discussions with them. Yeah, I can try to reach out.
Okay.
And
Thanks
then
a lot.
Jerry and Barry, if
Jerry,
you ever want to give a presentation, that'd be welcome too.
Yeah, I
your
think
experience.
for Barry, if you could help us understand the industrial IoT, like the settings, what are the challenges? If they stand from a Kubernetes perspective, what are the missing pieces? Then we can all address together.
Cindy, you might actually just want to watch the Eclipse Edge Native Working Group recorded session in which Barry gave a presentation, because he did that, and just don't want to make Barry repeat himself, but that might be a good place to start.
It wasn't really a presentation, like I said, it was just an ad hoc discussion of it, but
you let us know a lot of details, if I recall, that were really good.
So okay. Maybe offline, we can have some discussion, share me your link.
Yeah, Kilton, if you could drop a link to that presentation if it got recorded, that'd be great. In the meeting notes?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let me go find which recorded session that is and drop it in the doc. Yep.
Okay.
And regarding the Vapor IO, I think Matt from Vapor was active a little bit in the beginning of this group, so.
Oh right, he did come several times. That's right.
Yeah. So we can definitely reach out to him.
And if we can't get anything from Vapor, let me know too, because I know several folks over there, but it's probably the same folks. So we'll just hit them from 3 sides until they. Yeah.
I'll try this angle.
I think I brought up a couple of sessions ago with this group. Did any of you ever get a chance to take a look at IPFS, the Interplanetary File System?
Yes. It is super interesting.
Yeah.
And I got the sense that it had a lot of work being done on it for a while, and then it seemed to have tapered off, much to my dismay, because with that universal addressing is perfect for application layer networking.
Yeah, I think and I think it does seem to have a little bit of waning, not waning interest, but I do think on the development side of it kind of tapered off, and I think it's because the kid that was at Stanford went on to do something else. But I still think IPFS's underpinnings are significant, and specifically in edge environments could potentially be some phenomenally amazing implementations done. So I'm glad someone took a look at it. Thank you, Gilton.
I think it would be great to review it here because it really has an impact on the way that you would carve up your resource locations in a Kubernetes
Yeah.
driven system. Because you might be off of an IoT gateway somewhere, and that might be a privileged resource that you want to get things connected to. Well, how on earth do you address it when you've got 3,000 such gateways out there? Could be good.
Okay, I'll make some notes of these potential topics people have thrown out, and I'll get them in the agenda notes document, and then we'll try to get things lined up for some future meetings.
Yeah, I think this is great. I definitely learned a lot of things today. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can give I'll give you another example. And in fact, Stephen, if you want to look at this one, this is my former company, Ping Things. I mean, you came from Wonderware. You and I have actually run into each other before. Now that you said that, with Ping Things, we were basically dealing with sensors that are sampling at super high rates, like 240 hertz, all the way up to a kilohertz on a cycle. So we're generating petabytes worth of data coming from these sensors and utilities. This would be impossible without Kubernetes on what we've been able to do in changing the scope and size of what a historian is capable of doing. So, I mean, obviously with the Wonderware background, you get the historian side of it. But, you know, with that amount of data, things like OSI, Softs, Pi, and Wonderware, and, you know, Schneider's, whatever they called it, Aviva or whatever it was, bottom line, fall down and burn with that kind of input, you know, without much data. But Kubernetes was absolutely critical for our development and production and of the application that basically sustains, you know, one of the largest utility companies on the Eastern Seaboard called Dominion Software, Dominion Energy. My God, I'm software in the head. But anyways, I would go take a look at Ping Things because I think it is an interesting Kubernetes play, and it definitely kind of highlights kind of the benefits and power of, you know, what.
Okay, I will. Can I ask you what was the use case demanding the kilohertz sampling rate, and
Well, they did that
are the
today
timestamps accurate?
Yeah, they do it on default. They basically do it on digital fault recorders. So they're out there basically doing point-on wave for, you know, to watch the substations, transformers, the behavior.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, the behavior of the system.
So I think one of them I've come across before was electric utilities have these massive grids, like the ones that go across country. And when they have faults, it's sometimes not easy to establish root cause, like a whole region goes down. And if you could get super accurate sampling and accurate timestamps, which has always been an issue, you want to establish, well, what happened first? Because that's going to be the cause. You know, the thing that happened second couldn't have gone back in time.
Yeah, and this is all nanosecond scale timestamps.
Yeah.
So we basically, it's the federal government during the Recovery Act spent almost $500 million in conjunction with another $500 million from the utilities matched to put out these things called phaser measurement units, PMUs. And these things now permeate most of the high voltage transmission system in North America and around the world. It's starting to find its way into distribution today, but it was, you know, SCADA can only, you know, SCADA gets picked up once every, you know, 15 seconds. You know, it's a small, the sample is nothing. So you got a basic, you know, stair step. With phaser measurement units, you actually look at the actual almost the waveform. I mean, they're primarily tracking phase angle, but anyways, it is a major shift. If you would have told me 10 years ago that our North American power grid had no wide area situational awareness, I would have thought you were loony. Come to find out, we still don't have wide area situational awareness with the national power grid, and here we have an interconnected grid. So it's kind of hairball, but that's why they put these things in, because the northeastern blackout that happened in like 2003. So this investment started in 2008, and they're now starting to permeate the grid. But the whole back end system had to change out because Pi melted down. They tried it at Dominion and they couldn't even do it because of the level of data. So this is now today running on Kubernetes in AWS GovCloud, and they're shipping all their phaser data all the way up into a instance that we built there with Kubernetes and floated all of our microservices and our objects and our time series.
Okay, I'll look into that. That does sound fascinating. One of the best tech talks I recall was, this is now 4 years old, and it was at an old MezosCon, but a research group that's hosted at Cornell University actually was doing kind of the back end research based on monitoring the power grid. And
Yeah.
they had elected to use Mesos just because it gave them low level control. And I remember from the talk, they did have to use some dedicated hardware devices to get the time accuracy they really needed for that. So you were kind of, they even had difficulties with interrupt response time and things coming out of the Linux operating system. So in a way, Mesos was supervisory control over some specialized hardware. But
well, I thought you'd get a kick out of it, and I started to bore the rest of the group. But
yeah,
but Kubernetes was a major implementation change that really changed everything for to this day. They just did a big demonstration of this to the industry, and pretty much everyone's jaws dropped. So go take a look at pingthings.ai.
okay.
And there's an example of kind of scrolling down from 5 years worth of timestamp data down into a data point, in like Google Map fluidity. So.
Okay,
Sorry.
we're already 10 minutes over, so I think maybe you own the recording, Jan, so I'll let you close the meeting.
No worries. But yeah, we can continue next time. There's
Yeah,
definitely
I'd like
tons
to-
of topic
I'd like to
going
keep
on.
this going. Yeah.
I'll put my contact in the doc in a minute.
Okay. Okay, bye everybody.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers.